Nigeria might be heading for a full-blown economic crisis. This is the position of some analysts as the gross domestic product crashed to its lowest in about 25 years. I am Tolu Lokpe Ogunjobi. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. According to the latest report released by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's gross domestic product, which measures the worth of economic activities, crashed to 0.36%, minus 0.36%, compared to 2.11% expansion in the previous period and way below forecast of 1.7% growth. Now, this is the lowest since 1991 and the first contraction since the June quarter of 2004, as the non-oil sector crashed mainly due to a slowdown in service sectors due to a weakening naira, while oil prices keep dragging the oil sector down. Now, some analysts do not feel too good about the situation, some of whom have said the country is headed into a full-blown economic crisis. Now, to discuss this, I have with me an expert in the studio. He's Henry Boyo, an economist and an expert, to speak to us on this. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your time on Business Nigeria.
Thank you, Tony.
Now, let me ask you, do you actually think that the country is moving through, like the analysts have said, to a full-blown economic recession? Are we moving towards that direction?
Well, it's not so much what the analysts have said. It's what the Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics have indicated, that in terms of productivity within the economy, we are not moving forward, and we're not even stagnant. We have started to produce much less and less than what we used to before. And in technical terms, if there is that degree of cutback within any two consecutive quarters, the economy can be said to be in a tailspin of a depression. And the implication of that is that, of course, the speed of degeneration will only increase unless measures are taken to arrest it.
Interesting. Now, before we move on, let's see the last 5 trends of the Nigerian GDP. Now, the Nigerian economy expanded 3.96%. That's in quarter 1 of 2015, year on year, in the first 3 months of 2015, the lowest growth since the last quarter of 2012. It was the 3rd straight quarter of slowdown as lower oil prices and supply constraint dragged the oil sector down. Now, the Nigerian economy grew by 2.35% in second quarter, year on year of 2015, down from a 3.96% expansion reported in the previous quarter. It is the lowest GDP growth rate since the quarterly data is being released due to the decline in oil production and oil prices. Now, the Nigerian economy grew by 2.84% in the 3rd quarter of 2015, following a 2.35% expansion reported in the previous period. The oil sector, accounting for nearly 11% of total production, rebounded while service sector growth slowed. Now, the Nigerian economy advanced at 2.11% in the 4th quarter year-on-year for 2015, slowing from a 2.84%. The expansion gained in the previous period and below market expectations of a 2.6% increase. It was the lowest growth rate since at least 2005, as lower oil prices keep hurting the oil sector, dragging down government revenues and weakening the naira. And now the recent crash from the quarter, that's 2016, that's from 2.11% to minus 0.36%. Very worrisome. It was further stated that the oil industry, power and manufacturing sectors of the economy shrunk in the period of review. GDP annual growth rates in Nigeria averaged 4.212% from 1982 up till 2016, reaching an all-time high of 19.17% in the 4th quarter of 2004 and a record low of minus 7.81% in the 4th quarter of 1983. Now, the last time the Nigerian economy grew below 1% was in 1999, a few months after the return of democracy in May 1999. Now, I still have with me here Henry to speak more on this. Now, the Nigerian economy sliding just like into receipt. Now, how did we get here looking at the challenges? Because the drop in oil price and also the weakening economy and all the challenges we faced, was I responsible for this? Well, how did we get here?
Well, the optical cause of our predicament appears to be the crude oil price, the drop in crude oil prices, the significant drop in crude oil prices. But that is partially the explanation, because at the end of the day, even though the economy, as you have shown there, appeared to have grown fairly steadily over the last year or two, until the second quarter of this year, you will find that at the end of the day, when you fully consider the realities in the Nigerian economy, you will find that those growths were not reflected in the level of social welfare, in the area of job creation, in the area also of consumer demand. Consequently, it is not surprising that if past growth indicators have not reflected on the lives of the ordinary Nigerian in any significant way, particularly also in the area of infrastructural enhancement, then something other than the crude oil price may actually be responsible for what we're experiencing at the moment. In other words, the huge drop in crude prices may just have been the catalyst that blew open the, how would I say it, the false premise that Nigeria was growing by the growth indicators or growth figures that you have shown there. You sincerely cannot say you are growing when the people in your country are continuously growing poorer, and unemployment rate continues to be on the rise, such that well over 12% of rate of unemployment, and indeed almost 25 or 30 million Nigerians who are actually have an unemployment problem. So you will find that we should not just judge the performance of an economy by the figures reeled out by the Federal National Bureau of Statistics, but we should at least be more certain that whatever growth we talk about must be reflected in the lives of the people.
Very important. I want to go to the lives of the people now, because these figures we are showing, minus 0.36 and all that of the available data which we have, the Nigerian on the street wants to know how this will impact on me buying bread. It will impact on me having my salaries. How do I spend my salaries? Inflation stands at 13.7 as at the end of April. Now, so the man on the street would like to understand, how does this really impact to my day-to-day activities?
Well, I have bad news for the man on the street, because the reality is that his life, his social welfare, the value of life he leads, are inherently strictly governed by monetary and fiscal policies, particularly the monetary policies. In a situation, for example, you say, what can he buy in the market and all that? The reality, of course, is that if inflation is trending at 13% annually, it means that every 4 years, anybody who earns static income would lose almost 52% of the purchasing value of their incomes. So you can see that even though the statistics show that there's a gradual growth in domestic productivity, but at the end of the day, on the converse side, you find that individually, the person you think should be enjoying better welfare as a result of the growth in the GDP is actually suffering, because over time you've had an average inflation rate of almost 8%, and this translates over 5 years to almost 40% of value of your purchasing income. So in other words, if you were earning previously 18,000 naira minimum wage, and that hasn't changed within 5 years, the chances are that your 18,000 naira minimum wage would probably be buying just about 9,000 naira of what you could buy 5 years ago. So you inevitably you get poorer. This is the reason why best practice rates of inflation in successful economies elsewhere are designed to conserve consumer demand, and consumer demand either conserved or promoted in a manner that would, increase the enthusiasm of businessmen to create more businesses or to expand their businesses in order to be able to supply their demand or sustain their supply to a stable level of demand. But if, on the other hand, as a result of inflation creeping in and eating in, you see, inflation is a very silent plague. You wonder, for example, why most of your cousins, relations, and all that, who are much older than you, who are pensioned and who had decent lifestyles while they were working, suddenly become like destitutes when they retire and they start living on pensions. That is the reason why we should be very careful of inflation, because while they were making the pension contributions, they actually believed that they would be entitled to a better lifestyle, or at least keep their lifestyle fairly stable as a result of their income payments and all that. But it doesn't happen that way. Some of them would tell you that it costs just as much to go get the pension funds as than it would take for them to maintain some reasonable standard of living. So inflation is a very key parameter when you are looking at the welfare of the masses, and an inflation rate of 13% is no good for anybody, and it's not also good for investment, because, as I say, the person who used to buy, for example, 2 loaves of bread in his house for his family a day will suddenly find that he's buying 1 loaf of bread. The impact of that on bakers is that they would contract their production and ultimately send away some of their labor force. And this is what happens all over the place. This cascades in all other sectors of the economy. That is why inflation is a very bad, very, very bad omen, especially when it touches 13%, 14%. And there appears to be no respite to the scourge of rising inflation, because all the indices suggest that inflation will certainly go beyond 13%, because you have suddenly had, a devaluation of the naira. You've also had an increase in the cost of dollars that fuel importers could buy to import their petrol. In other words, a price of 145 naira per litre, which is currently being suggested, may be totally inadequate if you are asking the importers to buy their dollars at 280 or thereabouts, because internationally you find that fuel as a commodity, the average price is probably about $1 per litre. $1 per litre, if you're buying the dollar at 280, you are probably talking and looking at a fuel price of close to 250, 280, certainly before the end of the year. And this would have a further fueling effect on the price that is already too high for fuel. So you're going to have, certainly before the end of the year, fuel probably selling above 200 naira per litre.
Now, this brings me back to the Forex issue, which tends to be very, very important. It's been on for some time, and lots of agencies and even advocacy groups have come out to say the central bank needs to adopt a flexible exchange rate policy. Now, after the MPC meeting, which ended on Tuesday, they've come out to say, yes, we are taking that, we're adopting that now, and they've instructed that we could have a flexible exchange rate. Now, what impact will this have in the, let's say, immediate, before we now talk of maybe long-term, on our currency, which already is weakened against the greenback?
You see, the issue of exchange rate, there's a lot of misinformation on that. Out of every 99.9 Nigerians you will talk to, be they analysts, be they experts and everything, they will tell you that the Naira exchange rate is weak because we are earning less dollars and the price of crude oil is 99.9% of them would say this. But really it is false. And you will know it is false when you ask the same question and say, if indeed increasing dollar revenue would make our exchange rate stronger, how come when we earned much more dollars than we knew what to do with, and we agreed to be selling to Bureau de Change and even allocating, even when the Bureau de Change didn't want it, we said we would give them $60,000 each. And we also made it possible for every Nigerian who had a card, Naira debit card, who wanted to travel abroad. In fact, he didn't want to travel abroad. Somebody would come to him and say, look, I give you money to travel abroad. Take my debit card, go collect money from me. And we will openly, the central bank open-eyedly and liberally supplied every Nigerian who could afford to go abroad the possibility of taking $150,000 at official foreign exchange, not minding the fact that most Nigerians earn below 20,000 naira a month. So it appears on the surface superficially to be a conspiracy on the part of central bank to have liquidated our dollar reserves very quickly in this profligate manner by saying that every person can take your card and go and take $150,000. I didn't know about this for a long time but somebody told me, he said, you say you needed money abroad. What? It was simple. Why didn't you take? And I said, what do you mean? He said, you go there and you actually collect the money at official rate. And I said, how much? He said, you're allowed $150,000. And I wondered, I said, this cannot be real. But it was real. And it was in consonance with the demands of the IMF in terms of what was required when we exited the Paris and London Debt Club. They insisted that we should liberalize the market, and by that liberalization, they meant we should wastefully spend the dollars or wastefully spread the dollars that we earned, which was fortuitously very high in terms of revenue in crude oil at that time. So the question is, you have a situation where crude oil prices exceeded the $100 per barrel. We had dollar reserves in excess of $60 billion. The exchange rate somehow, you ask people, so wasn't that enough foreign exchange to make the naira rate become 100 naira to a dollar, or even 50 naira to a dollar? And they scratch their heads and they really can't understand. And they'll tell you, yeah, but this is different. The thing has collapsed. So it doesn't work that way. The reality is that a lot of people have been considering too much the demand aspect, of the dollar, without looking at the supply aspect of the naira. Without naira supply, you can't have much dollar demand. In addition to that, a market arrangement whereby the CBN deliberately and consciously regularly auctions the dollars they had captured earlier, to the market, to the banks, is a definite statement that you want the naira to continue to depreciate, because anything that you auction, you would want to sell to the higher or highest bidder, as the case may be. So if the CBN is consciously or deliberately auctioning rations of dollars in the market at any one time, it is obviously not going to sell to the person who offers the lowest naira value. It's going to sell to the person who offers the highest or the higher naira values. So by that market structure, the naira is done for, because at all times you will always have surplus naira in the market, defined by the level of liquidity that makes CBN do what you would call commercially unwise things, like borrow money you don't need and be willing to pay 10-12% for such funds, in spite of the fact that in the process you also crowd out the real sector from engaging productively within the economy and also providing job opportunities.
Just on the final note, now we're out of all these challenges. We need to be a way out, because economic watchers, planners, even the government economic policy makers are also trying their best to do this. The budget has been passed. Even the CBN governor also talked about the budget delay being part of this negative effect. And also we are on the part of diversifying the economy. If things are working well, we do this at appropriate time and things actually play out well, are we likely to see a rebound?
Well, I honestly, let's be quite honest, I really don't see how you could hope for anything better. In the first place, your budget was totally fraudulent, besides the principles predicating the 2016 budget are very controversial and questionable. We had the Minister for Information recently saying that Nigeria is broke. And you tend to wonder, when did they know this? Because if you were aware that Nigeria was broke, ab initio, as early as last year, for example, you wouldn't go and create a budget intention of spending 6 trillion naira. You don't go and spend much more than you have ever spent in your life at a time that it is very clear to you that your source of income, your major source of income, is dwindling. So so to come back and say Nigeria is broke, that's why we're having these problems, then why did you undertake to explode the size of the budget at a time that you knew that you had dwindling income? Why did you undertake to also decide to borrow in order to spend for consumer expenditure, especially at a time when you say You have recovered so much looted money from the robbers. And you have also said that you are blocking all the leakages within the system, like to 20,000, 40,000 ghost workers. You would expect all these to reduce your cost expectations within. If anything, the cost rose, your consumer expenditure or your consumer provision rose, and then you now celebrate that you are borrowing to put down infrastructural investment, when in fact you have surplus money within your domain. Why go borrow outside when your own CBN is lamenting that, look, I have an oppression of liquid excess naira. So you find that it would be very unwise for me to ever celebrate a budget that was conceived in the knowledge that Nigeria was already broke and yet accommodated almost 33% increase in spending, both in terms of capital and recurrent expenditure. It is frivolity.
I must really thank you for your time there, economist and financial analyst Henry Boyo. They're giving us insights into issues around the Nigerian economy, particularly with regards to the GDP rate, which is on the negative flank, and also on inflation and other things that have to do with the Nigerian economy. Thanks for your time on Business Nigeria.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, well, that's all we have. Well, that's all we have for you. But that's all we have for you today on Business Nigeria. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. I am Tolu Lokpe Ogunjobi. Join us again next time for a fresh edition.